with you. And so good to see you here on the Vote Common Good daily podcast. As we like to say, it's good to be seen by you. So thanks for watching on the live stream and good to be heard by you. Thanks for listening on the podcast. It's a Monday, which means we take a roundup of the news that has happened and we take a common good approach to the news. And today, Dan Deitrich is joining us. Super fun. You'll hear from him in a minute. But it's going to feel like your local evening news around here because on the news roundup, I mean, we have a little bit of news, some politics, weather updates, human interest stories. We're one sports story away from having the full complement of local evening news. I am in Minneapolis sitting down in the studio today. Would love to know where you are. So if you're in the comments, please let us know where you're coming from and where you're watching this and what it is that you're doing. And take this as a philosophical invitation if you're listening on the podcast. Like, where are you? Are you now here or are you nowhere? As the philosophers like to say when they play with that little word. As I said, we're joined by Dan Deitrich. Dan is our producer of the podcast and also, with us here on the news roundup today. Dan, good to see you.
Hey. Yeah, good to be here. I'm here in my home studio in South Bend, Indiana, and it is also bitterly cold here. And this is the room I usually produce the podcast from, usually behind the scenes. But glad to be with you.
Hey, I'm just now noticing, Dan, we have very matchy curtains going on. Behind me, I have a long pleated blue curtain.
Costco? That's where I got mine.
No, I bought mine from in some people's minds, non-reputable online retailer. That's... I don't even know if I can say that without bringing a rash of appropriate condemnation upon me. But I did order them and had them hand delivered to my home. And I hope those people get better wages, and I hope they have a chance to unionize. Well, hey, on the daily podcast, we like taking this what we call a positive, a hope-filled but open-eyed journey to engage the questions: what's going on in our world, and what can we do in light of it? So that's why we spend time each day giving you a roundup of the news, or on Tuesdays, we talk politics. We want a common good version of politics in our world, and we have a special guest lined up. I think we mentioned it last week. Katie Porter, the Congresswoman from California, is supposed to be the guest with Rob and I tomorrow, so I hope that happens, and we expect that she's going to be on. On Wednesdays, we talk about faith, common good faith, with our co-hosts Laura Truax, Stephanie Spalding, Dominique Gilliard, and myself. We take a run at seeing, is there a common good faith that we can find, all of us coming from the Christian perspective. On Thursdays, we take on issues. And last week, this week, and I think the following week, we are engaging the issue of abortion. Had a fantastic conversation with Elizabeth and Ashley last week. They're going to be on again this week. People have responded very well to that segment, and I'm so excited about it. And then our plan is to have a conversation the following week with Elizabeth Griswold from The New Yorker, who's doing some great work on people who are in the pro-life movement and what she's learned from them. It's really great. And then we talk science on Fridays. Last week we talked with an economist. The week before, our regular every other week co-host, astrophysicist Paul Wallace, was on. Paul will be on again this week. And so much happening in the podcast, and we're really glad to have you around, have you trafficking in all of this common goodness with us, and we'd love to have your input today when we take a run at what's happening in our world as far as the news. The common good news, which, for a group that wants to get faith voters to engage in politics and civic life for the common good, good news, that's just a freebie. That's a fun joke. That's a fun play on words. Because if you don't know religious people from the Christian tradition, we'll never get tired of telling you about the good news. And we're excited about the common good news. Today, we have 8 segments to our news roundup. We're going to talk about President's Day, Valentine's Day, and the days, so that stuff. We're going to have a little weather short conversation. We will talk impeachment, of course. We're going to talk a bit about Ash Wednesday, what's happening with COVID, what's going on with the White House, 2 segments on the White House, and then the fact that some big news out of the entertainment world. So all of that on a common good take on the news. So share it with your friends, call your family, get the kids out of bed, shake them up on this President's Day, even if they're not in school, and take them along on this journey with us. Hey, Dan, it's President's Day. Now, I got to tell you, I have for most of my life only thought about President's Day in its relationship to getting a deal on a mattress. I don't know why. Somebody explained to me one time why President's Day is the time when they sell mattresses, and I think it has to do with like tax returns, and special pricing, and kids being off of school. But there was some reason why mattress sales are happening on President's Day, and
Yeah,
I'm
it's like
sure
any excuse for the corporate calendar to throw a sale. And yeah, I've heard just tons of car commercials on the radio for President's Day. There's
it's just
nothing
something.
more American than consuming more goods on
I
this
mean, if you're
special
going to
day.
think about your presidents, those who are, indicted co-conspirator criminals, like our former president, our most recent former president, or ones who've been vice president and now president again, whatever you're thinking about your president, the founders, the founders and the flounderers, I guess you could say, of the presidency. Think about a mattress or a great deal on a new used car. A new to you used car. Hey, and we hit this period of time about now in the calendar in which special days are all over the place, right? Today's President's Day, which, by the way, means there is no mail. So if you're like me and in the midst of COVID and at a certain life stage, one of the more exciting things is to go check the mailbox and see if you got something. Well, nothing today. Just sit back like it's a Groundhog's Day version of Sunday. You're not getting any mail today. Banks are closed. Schools are out, which for parents is just, come on. So now you don't get to have 4 hours of arguing with your child about staring at a screen. That's not good news for anyone. You can't even go to the roller rink, which people used to do. At least here in Minnesota, I don't think our roller rinks are open for the kids to go out for a President's Day outing.
But it's not only open like the past decade, or
no,
I feel like I haven't
open.
seen a functioning roller rink in a while. So.
Oh, really? Well, come back to the future here in the greater Minneapolis area, and you will find roller rinks are still open. In fact, the roller garden, the place where I'm 54, and I think when I was 4, I was roller skating at the roller garden. That very place down the street from my house, still open. Cheapskate went out of business, but they're still calling the snowballs over there at the roller garden. So it's not only President's Day, very exciting, but it's Valentine's Day yesterday. Like, these days start to line up. And because Easter is a movable holiday based on the first full moon after the spring equinox, we also have Ash Wednesday, sort of the special day. So it's like there's Love Day, and then there's President's Day. There's like Execution Day for Ash Wednesday, where we prepare ourselves to take seriously the execution of Jesus. A very strange day in the alignment. And by the way, we'll talk about this in a bit. Vote Common Good and a number of other organizations are holding a Ash Wednesday online national prayer service to root out white Christian nationalism from our society this Wednesday. So more coming on that. So keep your ears peeled for such a thing. But all these days start lining up where we're supposed to structure our remembering, where I sort of make fun of all the special days, because I think every day of the year has some sort of day assigned to it by Congress or by popular narratives. Every day has something special, but I guess it's a pretty good idea that it helps us pay attention and remember the things that are supposed to matter to us in all of these ways. All right, so a recap on the weather. I don't know what the weather is in your place, but I saw the news today, and we're in that period of time where like much of the country is suffering under winter. So it is deeply, deeply winter all over the place. Where I am this morning, at least 1 hour ago, it said 19 degrees below zero. 19 below. Serious business around it. And it's been below zero I think for 9 days in a row, and we have another few days to go. It's going to, I think, total up 14 or 15 days where we have not gotten above, or if we did, much above no degrees. It's been a negative amount of degrees. It's like we're running a bank deficit on warmth and bank deficit on degrees. Dan, how are things where you are in Indiana? What's the winter weathery world bringing to you?
It's pretty similar. Yeah, it's been very cold for a very long time. People are buying all the necessities from the grocery stores. And it's like this every year. I feel like people forget what winter feels like, and then there's a panic when it sets in. And I grew up in Michigan, so I kind of like the winter, and
Mm-hmm.
just put on a warmer coat and drive slower. You'll be all right.
Warm it up and slow it down. That's what you do. All right. So we got these President's Day, we got Valentine's Day, we have Ash Wednesday. I mean, every day gets a day. It's like that old joke, that where people say, like, let's do something on every calendar day that ends with the word day. Do you know that joke? Because every day does, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Sounds like
Don't just do it on Sunday. Do it on every day that ends with a day. Well, let's talk a little bit about impeachment, Dan. Obviously, the big story over the weekend, I was riveted by it. I was caught up in it. It feels like, oh my gosh, maybe Donald Trump and Trump's personal failures and presidential criminality can now be put behind us. But I don't know. It's not entirely clear to me that now that we've gotten through the impeachment moment, which ended as a lot of us, I guess, assumed that it might, that no, Donald Trump was not convicted by a requisite number of senators in order to have a senatorial punishment assigned to him. But it seemed to me that, the case was made for how guilty he was for the very things that all of us watched happen on January 6th with that insurrection.
Yeah, and I think one of the shocking things is the votes came in. Mitch McConnell, of course, sided with the majority of Republicans in saying not guilty. And then he immediately went on the air and said, but Trump is totally guilty. Trump definitely did all these things. He called his actions, a disgrace and abhorrent. And it's just like the words don't match up with the actions. When it comes down to actually holding someone accountable, there's just nothing.
Yeah. Look here. So here's what Mitch McConnell said. I've spent a lot of time fussing over this, and I don't know. I think it's my way to just sort of be freed from all the madness that is Trumpism. But he has this comment, and I think, look, it's very hard for me to live my human and Christian ethic of believing people and trusting them and seeing the best in humanity and be involved in politics. So that's part of the thing we're trying to work out here at Vote Common Good is how do we do both of those things? Because they're really hard. Taking the man at his word. Now, caveat that with, should you take the man at his word? Because maybe what he's saying is intentionally deceptive and you should not believe what he's saying, because he's shown that he wants to keep those the truth of his words at bay. But taking him at his word, he says, and this is a quote, "I've made my view on this episode very plain. But our system of government gave the Senate a specific task. The Constitution gives us a particular role. This body," meaning the Senate, "is not invited to act as the nation's overarching moral tribunal." He's saying, look, the guy is as guilty as they come. It's just not our job to do anything about it once he's out of office. We have a very limited separations of powers, ability to act on the person who's currently in the role as the president, and we just couldn't do anything about it at this point. Somehow a statute of limitations like experience has now visited us. There's nothing we can do about it. But us saying he's not guilty due to that doesn't mean he's not guilty. This is the argument that he's trying to make, right? Which has led me to this conclusion. There is nothing this country can do about a runaway immoral president. In fact, maybe even a criminal president. I think the presidents of the United States are actually functionally above the law. I think that's what we have to conclude from every impeachment that has taken place of a president. They're not found guilty and removed from office, and that punishment is not brought upon them as in addition to the other punishments that could be brought upon them, like they don't get a pension, they can't run for office again, those other things. They don't happen. So functionally speaking, the Senate and the House will say nothing we can do about it. The criminal system says nothing we can do. Because look, Donald Trump, for most of his moral failings as president, were not things that are just criminally against the law. That's not the standard we're holding the man to. Now, I do believe that there's a number of things he did that were criminal, but around the insurrection itself, it was immoral, and it was a failure to fulfill his responsibility as a constitutionally elected public servant. Those are separate things. So to say, for the Senate to say over and over, well, throw it to the criminal system, let them respond to it. Well, that's the whole problem. You know, there are people who are diplomats to the United States, and because they're diplomats, they get this thing that I've known about since I was a child. I don't know why, but called diplomatic immunity. Like, we all know about this thing, right? Like, I don't know, like a diplomat can park where they want, and this has actually come into play. People have done things in this country, very violent criminal actions. And because they're a diplomat, they're found that they can't be charged. That's functionally the way it is with our president.
A while back that his security people beat up a bunch of people in broad daylight in New York or something, and just no repercussions because diplomatic immunity.
And they say, can't do it. It's like we're playing some kind of a weirdo board game with these people, and they're like, oh, got immunity. I got immunity. Oh, really? That's how this goes? Well, look, here's the thing from my new vantage point on all this. Yep, that's how it works. There's nothing we can do about the president of the United States when the president acts in ways that are immoral, which is why the role of the citizens and who we're going to elect is so important. We can't say to ourselves or anyone else any longer, in my view, well, there are safeguards in place. There are clearly not safeguards in place. The only safeguards we have is to be sure that the person who has the power of the presidency will live up to them, because there's no guardrail. We are climbing without ropes here. We're bowling with the gutter guards up. Like this thing that we think someone's going to solve this, someone's going to be out there. The current political environment in my view, has made it perfectly clear there is no solution for a renegade president. I mean, we've basically been told you can't be charged for stuff you do when you're president because you're the top of the legal system, so can't charge you, and the Senate's not going to punish you or remove you from office. Like Mitch McConnell saying somehow, well, had he still been in office, maybe I would have voted differently. Really? Maybe you would have voted differently? Like, why doesn't he come out and say, had we had this trial on January 19th, I would have voted to convict? But
that would have been too hasty.
Say that again?
That would have been too hasty.
Yes, they would have rushed it.
Snap impeachment and rushed, but now it's too late.
Yeah. So we're flying without a flag. Can I give you a little bit more of what Mitch McConnell said, just because it's so incredible? And in some ways, like, this is what's maddening about this man. He makes this very clear statement, which I think is good for people to hear. He says, January 6th was a disgrace. American citizens attacked their own government. They used terrorism to try a specific piece of democratic business they did not like. Tried to stop a specific piece of democratic business they did not like. Fellow Americans beat and bloodied our own police. They stormed the Senate floor. They tried to hunt down the Speaker of the House. They built a gallows and chanted about murdering the vice president. They did this because they had been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth, because he was angry that he'd lost an election. There is no question that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of that day. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instruction of their president. And their having that belief was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the largest microphone on planet Earth. Mitch McConnell, you should have been saying that every single day, if that's what you believe, as the House Senate, or as the Senate leader, or as the minority leader in the Senate. The fact that you made it this explicit and poignant just minutes after you had to vote to acquit. Now you make this the point? It's really something, right? That here are these Republicans trying to figure out a way to not have moved against the president because they don't want that record, but then coming out and making statements so that people can hear what they want to hear. And it's just another one of these times where you don't know if the politician is being clear or is being deceptive. And this is what makes people lose their minds with politicians. One more quote, and then Dan, I'd love to hear what you think about this. I thought this was important. He says, 74 million Americans did not invade the Capitol. Hundreds of rioters did. And he goes on to say, 74 million Americans did not engineer the campaign of disinformation and rage that provoked it. One person did. That's Mitch McConnell saying singularly Donald Trump. Now, what I think he's trying to do is he's trying to say, not all Republicans. Some people just vote for Republicans because they vote for the R. Nothing they could do. That's what I did. That's what everybody else did. I voted for Donald Trump just because I vote for my party. And like this kind of party loyalty is still hanging on. And the idea that Mitch McConnell supports that you can have party loyalty seemingly without condition. When you have loyalty to a political party without concern for the conditions of that candidate or of that party, you are not in a political party, you're in a political cult, it seems to me. In other words, you just hold to it no matter what. And this is what makes the impeachment moment so important, and why I don't think it was waste. I don't think something was wrongly done. I think it was crucial that all this be called to the national public attention with the loudest megaphone that we have, knowing that megaphone is just a megaphone and it's not actually a system of justice for a former president.
Yeah. I think one of the things I worry about is, even though this was on display for the world to see and Mitch McConnell's words are out there for anyone to hear or read, I think there's still such siloed news coverage of this that so many Americans that need to hear that the Republican Party isn't as behind Trump as it used to be won't hear that. They won't hear Mitch McConnell denounce Trump in those words. Wow. Or if they do, he'll be thrown under the bus and be the new Mike Pence, where there's gallows built for him. It's just wild. If you cross a line, you are immediately on the enemy list. And
totally.
It's just wild.
It is wild. And Lindsey Graham is one of those people. I heard him say, I think he said it on Sunday. I saw a recording of it. He said, Mitch McConnell got something off of his chest, but I don't think his views represent most Republicans. In other words, I don't think Trump did it. I don't think Trump's actions were disgraceful. He doesn't concede this notion that it's clear what Donald Trump did and we just couldn't hold him accountable. Lindsey Graham represents that portion of the party that says, no. There was no harm, no foul here. He never did anything. Or as Senator Mike Lee said, I think the president deserves, what does he call it? A mulligan, which is a golf reference for just swing at that one again. We won't count that shot against you. You get a freebie. But these guys, like, they're in another camp. And I actually think, Dan, that there's three groups of Republicans, and I think we're represented in the vote in the Senate. And here's where I think there's a macro version of what happened in the microcosm of the 50 Republican senators. I think that roughly 15% of Republicans are opposed to Donald Trump and willing to oppose him boldly and publicly. Well, that's 7 of the 50 people who are Republican senators voted against Donald Trump. I think that pretty much represents that there's 14, 15, 16% of Republicans that are like, Trump is a problem. He's got to go. I would never vote for him. He's out, right? That never Trump crowd. Then there are roughly what I would call 33, 34, 35% of Republicans who are for Trump no matter what. As Lindsey Graham put it, it's Trump plus for the next election. Like, we want people to double down on who Trump is. We are so for him. MAGA today, MAGA yesterday, and MAGA tomorrow, right? They are all for it. Well, that's roughly, I think 17 of the current senators in the United States Senate. I think they represent that, right? This is Lindsey Graham. This is Ted Cruz. This is Josh Hawley. This is the classic group of people that no matter what, they're for Trump, and they actually believe the things that Donald Trump believed. They come with the same anti-American, anti-racist, anti-democratic attitudes. Whether they're brand name Republican senators, like you know their names, or people you don't, I think that's who they are. Then there is the third group. There's about 50% of them. So the groups aren't split evenly. It's not 33, 33, 33%. But I think there's about 50, 52, 53, 54% of Republicans in the country who are like, look, I'll find a reason to back my guy. He represents, I'm a Republican. He's a Republican. I'm sticking with the team. Sure. I'm not for all that, but I'm going to stick with my team. About 26 of the current senators would fit that category. Well, I think that's where the country is. And the question is, where does our work go? I think our work goes into that third group. I think the work goes into that 50% of the people who are like, I just go along to get along, just all team. It's just all about political identity. And that's all I care about. And I will set aside my morals. I will set aside my ethics. I will set aside all the things I've said in the past. Dan, you were so good on the Vote Common Good tour of saying to a lot of these voters, especially faith voters, is, hey, don't listen to me now. Listen to yourself 5 years ago. Like, just take your own advice. Don't feel like you have to take mine. But I think that's where we are. And that's about 26 of the current senators. Now, I want all of the 43 who voted to not convict to be removed from office when the time comes. And our only response as citizens is to vote them out. It's not sufficient to decry. It's not sufficient to lambaste. It certainly is not sufficient to attack them physically. It's not even sufficient to call for in sort of political terms. I think we need to get away from all this fight language. What we need to do is we need to vote and vote them out. Now I start sounding like Barack Obama, right? Don't get mad. Get to the ballot box, and don't yell at me. Talk to your neighbor. Like, get people to step forward and to do something about it, because that's our only way forward. I think going after this 33%, 35% of people that would support Trump if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue, because 5 years ago he said, I think I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose any of my supporters. 5 years later, he tested it and said, well, I think I could kill 5 people at the end of Pennsylvania Avenue and not lose any of my supporters. He tested that theory and proved to be correct about it. So, all right, maybe we can stop talking about the failures and the abject disaster that was the Trump presidency, and talk about it only in context of how we need to move forward, and not who this man has been and how he has harmed this country so much. I don't know if I can stop, actually.
Well, I think one of the shocking things too about the impeachment was the speculation that if the vote were a secret ballot, that he would have easily been convicted. There's this idea of, if you have to go on record, though, and your supporters know which way you went, that they feel pressured. Some were even saying, like, I don't want my family to be in danger if I vote to convict Trump. It's like, it's
a real thing. Like you really, I don't give any pass to these people for not having moral courage. But to recognize the context in which they had to have moral courage, that's important, right? They really are under threat, truly and legitimately. There were thousands of people that showed up in Washington, D.C. that had the time, the energy, and the willingness to travel around the country, to go to Washington, D.C. on a day to break into a Capitol, to construct a execution model for Mike Pence. So the idea that these people are not actually under threat, they are under threat. Well, that's what we need to be working on and calling out. That's why at Vote Common Good, we're working hard on a de-radicalization program, because the subtle radicalization that has happened inside of the Republican Party and inside of faith communities, Christian faith communities especially, who support white nationalism at an unbelievably high rate, that's something that we really do have to consider and find a way to get after, is how we do this. So I think you're making a great point. It really, really is a threat to these people. And they still should have voted to convict. Seems to me.
Yeah.
Now, other than the one or two who are like, I really do think we don't have the right to, but every one of them should have been saying every day, I don't think we can impose this punishment because of some senatorial lack of standing with a former president, and then say all the things that Mitch McConnell said after this was all done. Say that every single day whenever somebody asks you where you are on this. But that's not how Republicans talked. They said, I'm going to wait to decide, or I don't think he did it. This is a sham. This is ridiculous. And that's the 17%, or the 17 senators represent that 33% of for Trump no matter what. And it's Trump's party. And I'm actually part of the Trump America. And that's what I want. And this is a serious, serious battle. And the fact that these people are afraid they're going to be killed by their own, or harmed, or otherwise attacked by their own party and by their own citizens in this country, that shows that we are living in some kind of a lukewarm civil war in this country that really has to be addressed.
Yeah, they've created a monster that is now at their doorstep, even as much as any other Democrat's doorstep.
Hey, one more little note on this. Apparently, Trump's lawyer, the Michael Vanderveen, had his house graffitied, his driveway, with the word traitor, where he lives outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So people went to his house. People who wanted Donald Trump to be convicted, I'm assuming, because they called him a traitor. So Trump's lawyer, they called a traitor, the one defending Trump. That starts to cross a line too, right? You show up at somebody's house. You say you're a traitor, which is words that are only kind of used either in metaphor or in there's a crime, the punishment for the crime of being a traitor, which is an execution. So you start using that kind of language, and we all need to condemn that as well. Look, you don't critique lawyers for defending someone. What we get in this country is defense, even if we're guilty. This is one of the foundational parts of being in the American legal system or in the American political system, where you're being charged with something. You get to have representation, and we don't condemn our lawyers for defending people, even people who are guilty or that we believe are guilty. So of course, extremism exists on all the sides, and of course, threats of violence and threats of consequence come down on everyone. Absolutely. And this all needs to be, we need to move away from that kind of language. And any of us who use it, any of us, and we partner with a lot of organizations that vote common good, and some of organizations and friends and partners we have, they really like language of mobilizing an army or getting we're going to fight for this issue. And they don't mean real violence. They're using it metaphorically. I just believe that metaphor has ceased to be useful. We should stop using violence metaphors and then tell ourselves, well, we don't actually mean that. We're just using it as hyperbole. It's not helpful to use overstatement, hyperbole, and metaphors of violence in our conversations with one another. We need to find another way. If you live by the proverbial sword, you will die by that proverbial sword, meaning it doesn't bring life. It only brings death, is what Jesus would teach, I'd say.
Yeah. I remember on the tour, some journalists asked you and I, Doug, they quoted some Christian pastors saying this is a battle between good and evil, and asked if we would use the same language. And I think when it's a battle between good and evil, any means justify the ends. You can lump a whole group of people as the enemy of the good, and all of a sudden these violent words that to most are just metaphors become justifiable actions as well. And so, just like you were saying, these words have weight, and what people have used in the past as metaphor, people are now using in very real ways. And everyone needs to just cool down this rhetoric, and this idea of good versus evil is just too lofty and out of touch with we're all humans, and we need to not view each other as mortal enemies of the good.
Amen, my friend. Amen. And to that point, Ash Wednesday is this Wednesday. Some people, if you don't follow the Christian tradition, you might not know why Ash Wednesday is moving around all the time and why Mardi Gras moves around all the time, which I'm sure is happening virtually. And I cannot imagine what a virtual Mardi Gras in New Orleans is going to be like on Tuesday with Fat Tuesday. But Ash Wednesday is this week. And Ash Wednesday is one of these days where the Christian tradition begins a 40-day period before Easter. It's a preparation period to live a new life. And it's when the Christian tradition, it's used, borrows actually a notion from the Jewish tradition that says you prepare yourself for change. You prepare yourself to analyze, to consider how you've been, to consider how you're living, to take account, and then to decide you want to make a change. And are there some things that you want to leave behind and some things you want to move toward and some things you want to step away from and some things that you want to lean into? So this is what we do at Ash Wednesday, or that's supposed to be the point. So if you're on some Zoom call incoming in the next couple of days, and on Wednesday, somebody has a cross smudge on their forehead, that's there on purpose. They went and had the ashes placed there. It's Ash Wednesday, and you're reminded of the mortality that faces you, and then to sort of consider your life in light of that mortality. And it's not threatening you with afterlife punishment. It's saying you have one life to live. It's also a great soap opera, but you have one life to live, and you should consider how you're living that life and live it in a way that's going to be beneficial and good for other people. So that's coming up this Wednesday. And that's one of the days, because we know that what that storyline leads to is the crucifixion of Jesus, right? A political execution done in public as a public lynching of the first century to try to use power of violence in a religious governmental fashion to try to bring about the outcome that people want. And the reason the Christian tradition says that we look at Jesus' crucifixion as the last, as the final, is because it's supposed to put an end to all of this. That all this death bringing and crucifying, it's going to kill even the very Son of God, and we have to bring an end to it. So let's set aside the violence that is rooted in our cultures and our societies and lean into something else. So that's what Ash Wednesday is up to and is trying to get to. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, there's then 40 days between Ash Wednesday and Easter, you actually have another week. There's 47 days between Ash Wednesday and Easter, even though it's a 40-day journey that Ash Wednesday launches into. Did you know this? I'm sure you did. It's probably one of those things. Because in the church cycle from Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday, you don't count the Sundays as a day, because in Lent, these are the rules inside the practice of Lent. It's 40 days in which you don't say the Alleluia, but you do get to say them on Sundays. So Sundays is like a little day off. So it's actually 47 days. And just, if we could make religion and the calendars any more complicated, I'm sure we would, but this seems to suffice for now, that it's a long period of time before we find ourselves getting into Easter, the Easter season. So I bring all of that up, partly just as a little, like news info about Ash Wednesday, but also that Vote Common Good and lots of other groups are joining together in a national prayer service to call out and call us away from white Christian nationalism in our country. So this Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, Vote Common Good and lots of other groups are going to host a 1-hour Reject White Nationalism Ash Wednesday prayer event, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Get on our email list. Go over to votecommongood.com right now. While you're over there, of course, you can go over on the podcast and sign up for the podcast and join us as we talk about how white Christian nationalism has invaded our culture, our society, and our churches hundreds of years ago and remains poignant today, and we need to do something about it. So join us this coming Wednesday when that all goes on. So that's the Ash Wednesday portion. Dan, anything to say about Ash Wednesday or about the white Christian nationalism rejection event that we're going to be doing on Ash Wednesday?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I grew up in the evangelical church and never paid much attention to Lent or Ash Wednesday. And I think the real gift of this day and this season is an opportunity for collective introspection and collective confession, which I think is lacking in a lot of evangelical churches. It's just praise and joy year round. And it's also very personal, right? Like, it's my personal relationship with Jesus, and any sin is an individual sin. And I think this gift is to recognize a collective sin of white supremacy and white nationalism, and spend some time wrestling with that deeply. We'll start a conversation on Wednesday with this event, but hopefully people dig into it for the next 47 days after that as well.
And we have a sign-on letter for evangelical leaders. So if you know any evangelical leaders, there's a specific recognition by evangelical leaders that we're putting together for leaders to sign on to, saying that they acknowledge and reject the white supremacy that led to the insurrection on January 6th and so much of the pain in our country. If that's something you're interested in, email me over at doug@vocommongood.com, and we'd love to get you on that sign-up list. It's going to become public on Wednesday or Friday of this week, where anyone can also sign on it. But what we think is important is to get lots of leaders signing their name to give the clear statement that those who build their reputation, personal and professional reputations inside of the evangelical tradition, that they raise their voices. Now, not everyone identifies in the evangelical tradition, and lots of groups have spoken out. Lots of religious groups have spoken out. There's been a shocking absence of evangelical leaders speaking out on this. So this is intended to catch that group up to the rest of the religious communities that are doing such things. So we'd love to have people be a part of that sign-on letter as well. All right, so that's Ash Wednesday. That's topic number 4 on our day. We talked already a little bit about the President's Day and the weather and impeachment and Ash Wednesday. Let's talk COVID. Boy, that's something that can take you for a couple of minutes. There's probably no experience in our society and our world right now that's as shared as COVID-19. We all live under a global pandemic. People have their views about it. The views range wildly. They move around for people. Some people are very comfortable in their views on COVID. Some people have felt like, boy, I've had 5 different feelings about COVID-19 and about how we've responded as a world. And I don't know how to think about it anymore, right? People are tired and they're confused. Well, here's a little data for us. Dan, I was shocked to find this out, that on January 12th, just over a month ago, there was a record 248,000 cases that were identified on that day. That's a big number. 250,000 cases on that day were identified around the country. And those are just the ones that are identified, of course, by a test. Yesterday, there were 91,000 cases in that day. That's what you refer to as a precipitous decline, right? That's a decline that is noticeable. So people are talking about what's gone on. What's the decline? I'm sure there's some Trump supporter that said, we told you right after Donald Trump wasn't president anymore, they were going to say the vaccine, that the pandemic's gone away. I don't know why I use that voice to talk about Trump supporters, but that's kind of what I hear that argument sounding like. No, this is not what anybody's saying. Nobody's saying that COVID's gone. We're saying there was a peak and now that peak has subsided. And it's not because the news is hiding the facts or was lying about the facts. So I just want to set that one aside. Of the 4 big reasons given by people in the press for this decline, that's, I don't think, a legitimate one of them. I do have an additional one that I think is not legitimate, and I'm surprised people aren't saying it, Dan, and it's this one. Well, the pandemic was God's judgment on Donald Trump being the president of the United States. Like I'm telling you, had Barack Obama been the president or Joe Biden been the president of the United States when COVID struck us, the number of religious people that would have been out calling this God's punishment for this country would have been over the top. Heard almost none of that when it was Donald Trump. So that's a curious little fact. But the 4 legitimate reasons that people are saying that the decline is on is that, one is the vaccines have started to work already. That literally, giving a million and then 1.5 million and 2 million vaccines a day has actually started to lower the number of tests that people are getting for positive tests that they're getting. So maybe it's vaccines. Other groups say, no, it's not vaccines. It's the protocols that have gone in place of social distancing. We had a big surge because Thanksgiving, holidays up to Christmas and New Year's and Ramadan and all of this caused people to behave in ways that we had a big peak. And now social distancing and protocols and mask wearing and 100 days of mask wearing that Joe Biden has asked the country to engage in, all of that has worked. They say that's what it is. So keep it up and don't stop. The third reason people say there's a decline is what epidemiologists call the seasonality of it. Like, no, literally, like in the winter, there's less transmission for all kinds of, maybe it's all this cold, maybe it's people just staying away from each other, but there's something seasonally that goes on. And they've been marking these seasons. We've had three peaks, in the last almost year of this pandemic. So they're saying it's a seasonality thing. And then there's a fourth that's really concerning to people who study this. And they're concerned that it might be this one, that since the vaccine is out, people aren't being tested as highly. That testing has dropped off since January 12th. So maybe the issue is that people are like, look, the vaccine's coming. I'm not going to run around and get tested anymore. I'm just going to wait for the vaccine. So maybe the numbers aren't down as much as we think they are. And that has all kinds of implication for people who are putting public mitigation practices into place, whether that's schools or governors or mayors who are trying to figure out about how you should live. So the concern is, what if people are not being tested? And they know those numbers that less people are being tested. But then other people are saying, well, the reason less people are being tested is because they don't have symptoms or they weren't exposed to someone. And so, now, is it a combination of all of those? Yeah, all four of those likely, probably not God's punishment or the media has been lying about the coronavirus from the start, which a lot of people were trying to suggest. But those other four might be coming into play. But here's the thing about a pandemic. We don't really know. And we don't really know what works, what doesn't work, and what's most effective. So what we have to do is care for all of these issues. Get vaccines, maintain our social distancing, continue to be tested, follow the seasonality. You just have to do all the things because even though it's been 11 months that we've known about the rampages of this pandemic, we still know so little about the human behavior and the contracting of this disease. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I think it's keep the foot on the gas in all of the above categories.
And of course, the big news on all this is, what about schools? Can schools get open? Joe Biden pushed really hard to get schools open within the first 100 days. The teachers' unions in many places have pushed back on that, not until teachers are safe. And it's become this big battle. And the Republicans are trying to use Joe Biden's commitment to open schools and the teachers union wanting to negotiate in a way that's safe for teachers as a way to say that Democrats and teachers unions don't care about kids. I don't know, Dan, if you've seen this, but I heard Chris Christie, former governor and indicted co-conspirator for a crime when he was governor from New Jersey. He said this yesterday. He said, yeah, this just proves that the teachers unions don't care about urban kids. I mean, it's just unbelievable how they will spin this around. That particular crowd that just hates teachers unions, by the way. I mean, there's a kind of Republicans that don't hate teachers unions. And then there's the ones who are like, we have some real foes in this world in our political imagination, and teachers unions are at the top of the list. That kind of Republican, they're using this moment to try to say that the pushback to opening all schools, by the end of March is something that they're just not open to.
Yeah, I think I have strong feelings. My wife is a teacher, and it's interesting. We live in northern Indiana. Indiana has not put teachers on the list for vaccinations, but Michigan, just across the border, has prioritized teachers. And so we've got friends in Michigan that are teachers. They're getting vaccinated, and we can see that they are a priority to the state. And then here in Indiana, the governor has said, no, teachers have to wait, but you have to go back to teaching in person with a room full of 30 kids that changes every hour. And so I think there is, it's like this state by state thing. There's no central leadership, and the central leadership is just like open schools, get kids back in the classroom because that's good for their well-being. And I totally agree. I think my kids do better when they're in the classroom. But if that's the priority, then let's get teachers vaccinated. Like, what's
Yeah.
the holdup?
What is it with that? Do you know? Like, literally, what is the holdup with saying put teachers, because there's not that many teachers, move them up to the top of the list in every state so that they're vaccinated by the time schools open? That seems so reasonable to me. Is it just that we still fear that the supply of vaccine is still so low? Do you know? Like, are you hearing anything as a teacher, family, community member?
I haven't heard much about vaccine supply. It's just this argument that schools can reopen safely just by following social distancing and masking, which anyone who's been inside a classroom in recent years knows is just an impossibility. Like,
Yeah.
especially in middle school and high school where kids are switching classes every hour or so. So teachers are being exposed to not just the 30 kids in their classroom, but 100 odd kids throughout the day, all mixing it up and crammed in small rooms that don't have enough room for 3 feet of distance between students, let alone 6 feet of distance.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't heard a lot of satisfactory arguments for not vaccinating teachers.
Yeah, I don't get it. Well, Tricia says on the Facebook feed, and sorry all if we haven't followed up on all your comments, but Tricia said they've placed teachers on the essential workers list, and it makes no sense that they wouldn't be at the top of the list. I think I tend to agree with that. I'll just say that I looked on getyourvaccinenow.com or getonthevaccinelist.com, this kind of government supported list that that tells you when you can get your vaccine. And in the state of Minnesota, an essential worker was not included as a teacher. That wasn't one of the categories that I saw when I was on that list for who gets to be sign up to find out when you can get your vaccine. So I think Dan's point might be happening in reality, that we don't know state by state where the options are, or where a teacher lies on the options for getting a vaccine. It's still a state by state side, which I just guess, and maybe the Biden administration has done this and just haven't heard about it. Change that. Like, say teachers get to be on the list, and move that thing forward and make a big push that way and prioritize it. This is those moments that feel confusing to me about what a presidential administration can do, and this seems like it's one of them. And maybe there's some big pushback from some of the other groups that say, no, we want other groups to be at the top of that list. But this is why we should have never been in a situation, right, where this was so bad in the first place, and so we're having to catch up. So let's try to get this thing wrapped up as fast as possible.
Yeah.
All right, topic number 6, you ready? Go ahead.
Last thought, just my frustration with the Biden administration and the CDC issuing kind of mixed messages about this. And so the CDC came out and said, yes, you can open schools safely without vaccinating teachers. But not a clear, there's been some mixed signals around that even. And it'd just be nice, with a teacher in the White House, Dr. Jill Biden in the White House, I would love to hear more advocacy for teachers all across the board. So
I'm with you. Teacher, give me the news. All right, number 6, back to the White House for a minute. Did you see this story that a White House spokesman had to resign because of the way that he responded to a reporter about a story the reporter was working on about this spokesman for the White House? His name is TJ Ducklo. He's in having a relationship with another reporter, and they wanted to do a story about him as a spokesperson. In other words, interfacing with the press, having a relationship, a romantic relationship with a person that's a reporter. And this person responded to the reporter wanting to write a story about this by threatening her, saying, I'm going to ruin your life and things are going to be horrible. And that news got out that he, in a phone call, said, I'm going to make sure bad things happen to you if you write this story, and somehow using power. The
and using
White
a lot
House,
of awful sexist language too.
Yes. Yeah. In addition, speaking in ways that are not unprofessional. But even if you were using the greatest level of decorum for a government official to threaten a reporter that you're going to ruin their life and their political life and their work life if they write a story, in my mind, no matter how nicely or how crassly you say that, and Joe Biden had said, if any people working for me treat anyone else, now he said coworkers, but I think he meant anyone who's involved in your professional life this way, you're gone. So the White House put him on leave, and then he resigned over the weekend. So fast and swift response. Now look, no idea if it's appropriate to be in a relationship with a reporter. I do know it's inappropriate to threaten a reporter about writing any story.
Yeah.
Any administration should not be threatening people, especially the press, about writing stories. And all of us as citizens who know that the freedom of press is a crucial part of our democratic freedoms have to make sure that anytime at any level, whether it's at the federal level of the presidential administration, the federal level for House members or senators, our state level, or anybody who's giving up any of their life just volunteering for the common good, if a reporter is doing their work, to shut them down, to threaten them, is to violate the thing that we all hold to in this country. And it's time to get back to defending the rights for people to do this. Now, look, I know how hard this can be. I've had negative things written about me, and I've had people that I don't really think are reporters, but they like write a blog or they run a web show like this, or they do something else, and they act like they carry that freedom. And we don't actually define what a journalist is and what a reporter is or what the press is in this country. We don't have a clear designation between a blogger, a Facebook post, and the Washington Post. We don't make a distinction between, it's not so clear to know what makes you the press or not, right? But you do know when someone's clear, like they work for Politico, they work for sure, we don't have a clearly defined knowing every person that's in the category of the press and every person who's out. But when the person has like White House press credentials, you know this person is understood to be acting in a role of representing the press. And the fact that TJ Ducklow went after that person, that's something that I think we can all cheer on. And whatever mistake he made, may he rectify it, and hopefully his life isn't wrecked by it, and that he can move on somehow to something of some kind of decent service for other people in this country. But I thought that was really good news. I was so disheartened by hearing the story when it first came out, and I was heartened to hear that the White House remedied the situation and kept their own house clean on this one. And they're only 3 weeks into the administration, so it's not like this isn't going to happen again. Oh, it's going to happen again. People make mistakes like this, and people with bad intentions work for every administration or in every political party. None are pure, and none are purely evil.
I am a little surprised that they let him resign rather than firing him outright. Is there any like legal reasons why you do that, or what
like why you put him on? Yeah, why they put him on like suspended him?
Yeah,
I don't know. And I haven't seen the details on this. Maybe they would say he's suspended and we're going to investigate this hard right now, and then before they could, he resigned. I don't know. I mean, there's somehow there's like there do need to be employment
due process. Yeah, like we have to investigate before we can whatever.
But I think you're right. It would have been so I don't know if they were managing it and didn't manage it well, or if there was something else going on. I don't know. But I'm glad it was public, and I'm glad it came out with a public response, and that he settled it. And could it have been better? I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hey, one more note from the White House. They announced the relaunch, you could almost say, of what's referred to as the Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships Office in the White House. This is something that Obama had started back in 2008. The official statement that I received yesterday said the office's principal function will be to promote partnerships with religious and secular organizations to better serve people in need. So it's a liaison office and partnership office with religious and secular organizations to serve people who are in need. It was an important role. A friend of Vote Common Good and friend of this show, who's been on before, Josh Dixon's going to be working with that group. I think is the one of the directors of one of the projects in there. Super glad that it's happening, and glad to see that the Biden administration is reaching out to faith voters and finding a way to connect them, and hope that this is just the starting line and not the end line. I don't think it's enough to just have an office for faith-based and neighborhood partnerships. I think there's a lot of other things the administration and our government can do to be sure that faith voters are not capitulated to, but also are not ignored. And it's something that I hope they take on. And I want to congratulate him for launching this, and Josh for his role in it, and think it could be a really important part of the future. All right, we're running out of time here, but last point, we did promise people a little entertainment news. This was shocking news to me, that starting this summer, the Kardashians won't be on TV anymore. Even more shocking, for 14 years, the Kardashians have been on TV. For 14 years, the E! Network,
I didn't realize that, yeah,
has been following the Kardashians around with the stories of their lives, and they're not going to be on anymore. I've never watched it. I don't hold anything against Kim Kardashian or any of her family. I only know her. I don't know what this is. I'm just a little shocked that it's been 14 years that the Kardashians have been on television, and now they're not. And I guess you don't know how much you love something until it's gone, or you don't know how much you didn't care about something until after 14 years and 20 seasons, because a season doesn't mean a year, of course, in television lingo. They're not going to be on anymore. So, wow. What a news roundup, Dan. Boy, so much happening, so much going on. Thanks all for being a part of this. Hey, if you've already subscribed to the podcast, that's not what I want. If you already subscribed to the podcast over at votecommongood.com, thank you. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and do it. Stop your phone now if you're listening on your phone or your computer, and go over to votecommongood.com, click there, or anywhere you get podcasts. Here's the thing. I know everybody says this, but really, pretty much anywhere. I think even on the iHeartRadio network. I think you could even say to your smart speaker, play. Have you tried this, Dan? Have you tried saying to your smart speaker, play Vote Common Good on iHeartRadio or any of these places?
I haven't, but I'm going to go inside and do it.
Let's all do it. Let's everybody do it at the same time. Maybe it'll cause us to trend. Just yell out loud right where you are right now. Hey, Alexa, play Vote Common Good podcast on iHeartRadio. Oh, no. I forgot I have an Alexa sitting behind me, and she just chimed in. I don't know if you heard that, but there she was. And if you're only listening on the podcast, thank you so much for listening on the podcast. We also run the live stream. And if you're on the live stream, tag a friend in this. All of you are making great comments. Thank you for your participation and for commenting. Alexa, stop. I really have to turn Alexa off. She, once she gets started on this thing, and I apologize for applying the gender to her, but I do see her as a female voice. She just will, she wants to make sure she heard me right. She just now addressed me by my first name. Said, "Hey, Doug, I'm sorry. I don't know what you want me to do." And then I had to say stop, which the command you have to give to Alexa, she's going to listen. The command you have to give to her is something you would, it's a little abrupt. I need to know, maybe somebody in the comments or could email me, Doug at votecommongood.com or podcast at votecommongood.com. If you want to go to any of our podcast hosts, how do you speak kindly to your machine? Not because the machine's feelings will be hurt, but it's just not good practice for us to say things that we wouldn't normally say to one another. What neuro psychologists tell us is the behaviors that we engage in regularly start to normalize. So this is why, the idea of getting something off your chest and just being angry or yelling or something is not getting it off your chest. It's confirming it in your neural patterns. So we really should not do things that we don't want to do for whatever reason, like aggressive, violent, or rude action. So I'm reading a lot into how I talk to my Alexa, but I'm spending a lot of time talking to this device. And if you want to talk to your device, ask her to play.
Talking to Alexa always. When the robots take over, I'm pretty sure they're going to remember who was polite and who wasn't. So.
Do you think robots would give you more preferential treatment because you were polite, or are they like, hey, we like your attitude. You're one of the straight talking mean ones. Are they? I feel like they're going to come around and be like, yeah, you polite ones, you're the first ones we take out because you were easy to push down. Like that. Like there was a joke on Saturday Night Live in one of the news things back from the 70s, which was, and I can't remember who said this, but he said, it's written that the meek shall inherit the earth. And that's okay because we'll just push them down and take it back if we want it, which I thought was kind of a funny line. Maybe that's the way the robots are, right? All of you polite ones, you're going to be the ones that go first. Hey, thanks for spending an hour and 7 minutes with us. We really appreciate it. And if you're already part of this Vote Common Good world, we got an email coming for you today that's asking you to be in for 10. It's a campaign we have going asking you to make a $10 contribution every month for the rest of this year, so we are prepared for 2022. And we'd love for you to make a $10 contribution to what we're up to here in our In for 10 campaign. If you're not yet with us on Vote Common Good and you're just watching on these places, wherever you see this, you're likely to see that invitation. But go over to votecommongood.com, get on our email list. We have special gifts and surprises for you all the time over there, so please get yourself signed up because we'd love to stay in touch with you that way. Dan, anything else of the common good for the good of the people?
Nope. See you next time.
All right, friends. We will see you next time.